Hey everyone, this is episode 260 of the Laravel News Podcast. Today is Tuesday, the 9th of June, 2026. I had a little bit of a scheduling conflict last night, aka I was exhausted, and so Michael very kindly offered to move it to today. So Michael, I'm going to say how are you, but we're going to keep this one quick. We're shooting for 30 minutes here. So we're going to keep our introductions brief here, and then we're going to get right into it. Michael, how are you?
Going well, excited. Tickets are on sale for Laracon AU. Everything's happening. Laracon US is sneaking up on us too. It's not that far away, so it's all happening.
Yes, it is.
And like Laravel Live UK is in 2 weeks as well. So
yeah, it's all going down, folks.
The Laravel stuff is happening.
Summer of Artisan Fun. It's going to be wonderful. Folks, we are going to start off talking about Laravel 13.12. Let's jump right into it. What is new? We've got custom attributes on scheduled events. So scheduled events now support a with attributes method. And what this will do is allow you to attach arbitrary key value data to that event. So these attributes are then accessible inside of the lifecycle callbacks. You can use these to tag events with metadata for like monitoring or metrics, or if you wanted to log something without resorting to parsing the command string or the description, you can now add these by using with attributes, arrow with attributes. There you go. That's by Cosmos Tech is what that one is by. Thank you for contributing that one. Luke Kuzmish. There we go. Much better. There is a new should be discovered interface. This lets auto-discovered listeners, because that's kind of how the default is now. It allows auto-discovered listeners to decide whether to register themselves. Implementing the interface and returning false from its static should be discovered prevents that listener from being included during discovery without needing to remove it from the listener's directory or moving the logic into the handle method. So this was introduced a couple versions ago where listeners would auto-register themselves. You didn't have to go through and register them in an app service provider anymore. And this allows you to basically opt out of the auto discovery. This is particularly useful for listeners that implement the should queue. Skipping discovery at the class level means that the job will not be dispatched at all rather than being queued and then deciding to do nothing in the handle method. So you might want to use it for that. There is an example inside of the show notes. Check that one out. Jack Bayless, thanks for contributing that one. Opting out of worker restarts on lost connections. So queue workers currently restart themselves whenever a database connection is lost. So the connection drops, they say, I need to restart, and so it kicks off itself. This can cause boot looping when you have multiple database connections, like replicas, think replicas. If one of them becomes temporarily unavailable, it will just start that loop up. So this new static property allows you to disable that behavior. The static property is stop on lost connection, and you set that to false. The worker will log the lost connection and continue pulling rather than exiting. And so this is an opt-in, does not change default behavior, but that one was also contributed by Jack Bayless. SQLite URI-based connections. These SQLite connections, which have been, I think, the default for Laravel since Laravel 12, now accept the file URI prefix format and was introduced in PHP 8.1 and PDO. This will allow you to specify SQLite options such as cache equals shared and mode equals RO directly inside of the connection string rather than as separate config options. So inside of there, database, arrow, file, colon, the path to it, and then any of those options that you wanted to set that just get set as query parameters on that URL string. That was Crinobone. Mr. Crinobone, been around for quite a while. Thank you for contributing that one. Okay. The str class has gotten Studley and Pascal normalization. These now accept this normalized parameter. When true, any all uppercase word segment will be lowercased before conversion. So strings like ALL_CAPS, all caps, like if you have it in all caps, or acronyms will produce the expected Studley case output. So if you have all caps and as all capital, instead of just hacking out that center underscore and leaving it as all caps, it will actually lowercase it and give it to you so that the first character is uppercased and the rest of it is lowercased. This was not the case before, so you have to pass this normalized parameter. Look at the show notes for this one. If you need this, you'll know. It's not super important, but it's worth noting that it's now been updated. Okay. client request URI for HTTP client middleware. So the HTTP client request objects now have this URI method, and this will return the full URI interface for that request. This is really useful in middlewares when you need to, you need like the complete URI, including the scheme on the front, the host, the path, the query string, and you don't want to have to manually reconstruct all that information. You can now just say on the request, you say URI, and it will give you back that whole URI interface for that request, and then you can manually kind of pull those pieces off or take a look at it and inspect it as you need to. Steve Bauman contributed that one. A couple more here, folks. We've got like 3 more. Stick with me. Here we go. Number 1, assert JSON paths canonicalizing on test response. What this will do is it will assert that a set of JSON paths contain the expected values, comparing them in a canonicalized way. Again, on this one, I'm going to say whenever we're doing JSON assertions, which I got to be honest, there's a million. I feel like every Laravel update has one of these, right? An assertion against JSON for the test stuff. If you're in that world, you're going to want to look at this. Go for it. Prohibitable, cache clear, and key generate commands. Okay. So cache clear and key generate are both artisan commands. These are things that you would key generate. You think about that. That's going to be something that you would utilize when you're first spinning up an application. Cache clear is something that you would say you probably don't want to do super often unless you're in like a local environment. So these 2 commands can now be prohibited using artisan prohibit. This is something that was previously introduced. What this does is it basically puts a stop sign up in front of you if you're trying to do these in a place where it seems like you shouldn't be able to do them. This is consistent with other prohibitable commands, and it's useful in production environments where you want to prevent accidental key rotation or cache flushes. So if you say, if this app is in production, you do this in your app service provider, then you would take the command and call prohibit on it, and then it would say, nope, you are not allowed to run this particular command in production. So now both of those artisan commands are able to be prohibited. All right, schedule callback parameter resolution fixed. There was a bug introduced in 13.10 that caused schedule event lifecycle callbacks to only inject the event instance. I'm going to let you read through this one. That is just a bug fix there. There's, of course, other miscellaneous fixes and improvements you can find in the show notes, but that's all the high points. Trying to stick to that 30-minute mark, Michael. Going as fast as I can here. You are up next, my friend. Hit it.
The Laravel team also released version 13.13 with a new method for dispatching many jobs. Added by Jack Bayless, the bus.up bulk method dispatches an array of jobs to the queue while grouping them by connection and queue so they can be pushed using the underlying bulk queue method. Unlike bus batch, it does not track batch progress in the database, so it's fit cases where you want to on-queue many jobs without that overhead. Lucas Cavalieri added the attach from storage and attach from storage disk to the notification mail message class, bringing it in line with the attachment helpers already available on mailables. I needed this the other day, and the doc specifically said it wasn't there, and now it is, so thanks to Lucas for that one. Will Rowe made the client return by the HTTP build client method usable anywhere that a PSR client interface is expected. You can handle Laravel's HTTP client. You can now hand Laravel's HTTP client to a third-party package that requires a PSR 18 client, so its requests run through the same middleware and handler stack as the rest of your application. And 2 small ones here. At Genki updated the cache attribute to support injecting a memoized cache instance into constructors and resolve methods, building on the cache memoization that was added in earlier 13.x releases. And Michel Vanier added vector index support for MariaDB in the schema builder. There's also a bunch of validation and query fixes included in this release. We'll have links to all of that for you in the show notes.
All right, folks, we're going to move on to the news. If you, like me, have been really frustrated by how many Dependabot things there have been in the last few, I don't know. It feels like every Dependabot thing that I squash, it feels like there's 3 more. This is something that is happening, I feel like, because of AI-generated tools or AI-powered tools for finding vulnerabilities, right? And so PHP is not taking this sitting down. The PHP Foundation has just announced a new ecosystem security team. So this has been funded by a grant from Alpha Omega, and the goal here is to improve security across PHP open source. So Volker Dush will lead the effort as the ecosystem AI security engineer in residence at the PHP Foundation. So this is a 6-month full-time role. What are the goals here? Well, the statement put out by Elizabeth Barron said this: PHP is foundational to the modern web. Ensuring its security is essential for a significant portion of the web's functionality and integrity. So the goal here is to help triage vulnerability reports, working on tooling to discover, classify, and remediate security vulnerabilities, and then sharing emerging techniques on using those tools effectively with the wider PHP ecosystem so that we can adopt those things and then get them into our workflows. The idea here also is to respect maintainer bandwidth so that we can provide high quality reports and help coordinate project access to this new security tooling. And then Volker himself, Volker Dush, said, my goal is to be open and communicate early about how the ecosystem security team is taking shape while making the most of the resources we have. So excited to hear about that. If you maintain a PHP project or you want to help, you can reach out to Volker directly by looking at the items in the show notes on email, Mastodon, LinkedIn. All 3 of those are available for contact methods for Volker. Check that one out.
Aegis for Laravel is a package built by Haris Raftopoulos and released on stage at Laravel Live Japan 2026. It is a package built around a pattern that he keeps coming back to, and that is value objects. They quietly remove a whole class of bugs that primitives cause, but writing them by hand can get tedious fast. Aegis will write the tedious parts for you. So the problem is that a string isn't an email until someone validates it. An integer isn't money until something tags it with a currency. And we pass these raw primitives around our applications and trust they're correct, then lose an afternoon to the one place that they were not. A value object fixes that. Its constructor takes the input and either produces a valid instance or throws an exception. And once you're holding an email object, you know that it is an email. Bad values never reach the rest of your system. The catch is that boilerplate. A value object has not done its job properly, runs about 70 lines of PHP and a final read-only class. The validation is in the constructor, normalization, and equals method, the castable block with get, set, and compare so Eloquent can store it. Typing all of that for every string a team wants to harden costs more than the string was costing you in the first place, so people skip it and the primitives stay. Aegis will write all of the boilerplate for you. One artisan command produces the class with everything wired up, plus a test stub, and you fill in the methods that belong in your domain. You can install it through Composer. You can scaffold a value object using an artisan command, which will generate 3 things. Your class itself, which is a final read-only validated and normalized object that implements stringable and JSON serializable, so it behaves at the edge of your application and it carries the castable block for Eloquent. The domain method returns a string method. The domain method returns a string that you asked for if there was an empty stud waiting for your logic. There's also a corresponding test in your pest folder if it exists. Aegis will write a to-do if it does not, and it will mark the test incomplete if you're using PHP unit instead. Then it patches your models, adding the corresponding email cast to the cast method and preserves your existing indentation, and it is safe to run again because the cast will only get added once. You can validate with the same value object using the value object rule. You can resolve validated instances. You can find candidates for value objects in your application using the artisan VO scan method. And Aegis will walk your Eloquent models and migrations, flag column names that match common patterns like email, URL, UUID, country code, etc., and prints the exact make value object command for each one of them. It will read through fillable, cast, properties, and cast method declarations, plus any schema create blocks in your migrations. It will never touch your database. You can pass JSON for machine readable output. You can use nocast to drop the cast suggestion for each command, so on and so forth. There is a bunch of flags. Love a good value object. Recently implemented an email one myself, so it's definitely something that you should consider. A little bit of history on the package. Greek mythology. The Aegis was Athena's shield, the thing that she carried into battle to deflect what shouldn't reach what it protected, which is exactly what the constructor of a value object does. It accepts what's valid and refuses everything else. The pattern itself goes back to Eric Evans' domain-driven design, and Martin Fowler's patterns of enterprise application architecture. So none of this is new, but Aegis will take care of the typing so you actually reach for it next time a raw string starts causing you trouble. Aegis, well done, Harris Raptopoulos, for bringing the Laravel flair to an age-old solution.
Very cool. Well, hey, folks, speaking of security stuff here, supply chain attacks are nothing new, but they have been more, it's been increasing recently. And so once again, our package manager, in this case, Composer, has some new ideas about how to help with this. Composer 2.10 is now available. So I would, if I was you, run Composer self-update. If you happen to have a Laravel Forge managed server, they will run that for you as a scheduled task every night. And so you will be on the latest version of Composer very quickly if you're not already. And what this includes here is this new native malware filtering, a new dependency policy configuration system, and then several security related changes for PHP projects. So the short version of this is that Composer update, I believe already would prevent including or allowing the installation of packages that were compromised. So something that was shown to be or known to be compromised, it would not allow that to be included if you were doing a Composer update. However, if you had a lock file already and you were running Composer install, it would still allow it. This now, I believe, removes that sort of hole, I suppose, in the security there. I'll read some of the release here. It says Composer 2.10 introduces a malware policy to enable rapid removal of malicious versions published by attackers who briefly gained control of a legitimate package or by maintainers that are acting in bad faith. These flag versions are removed from the resolution pool on packages so they cannot be installed via Composer update, Composer require, or Composer create project. And then, as we stated, crucially, this check also runs during Composer install. So a malicious release that slipped into a lock file will not be silently pulled in on CI runs or in production deployments. The same versions that are will be surfaced by Composer Audit, which will fail when the audit finds the malware by default. So couple other things to read on that as far as the config policy is concerned. There also is a full write-up on Composer 2.10 release announcement, as well as an update on Composer and Packagist supply chain security, where they go into all the details on exactly how they're doing this. They're also encouraging anybody who maintains a package on packagist.org to please go in and enable MFA if you have not done so already. Is going to be required in the near future here. So definitely check that out. Great news on that front. Always love to see these security related releases, and excited to get that one installed on our side and configured.
Laracon AU on the 1st of June officially unveiled its full 2026 schedule, including all of the speakers, talks, and workshops for this year's event. The conference lineup features talks covering Laravel, AI assistant development, testing, scaling, engineering, culture, filament, Statamic, architecture, and building high-performing software teams. Marcel Potziot, Matt Stauffer, Joel Claremont, Austin Carpenter, Matthias Hansen, and Ashley Hindle, to name some of the speakers. And the workshops on day 0 this year, the day before the main conference, 2 of them back-to-back, morning and afternoon, 4 hours apiece. Joel Claremont testing a Laravel app from scratch, and Devin Garbalosa, ship fast, load faster. If you want to check out the full schedule, all of the speaker details, workshop information, you can check out the Laracon AU website at laracon.au. Hope to see you there.
Absolutely. Is JMac going this year?
Not this year. Not this year.
Not this year. But a previous
Everyone
speaker...
always wants to come back, though. Everyone always wants to come back.
Absolutely. Actually, I was at a... Oh, this is part of the thing that we're trying not to do. I'm going to tell you quick. I golfed with a guy from Australia last Friday. It was really fun.
There you go.
Yep.
Nice.
He was amazingly. He was a senior PGA pro. Really, really good. Super talented. Anyway, okay. The reason I ask about JMac is because he's the author of this next post. So we're talking about Shift, Laravel Shift that is, and AI to give you fully automated Laravel upgrades. So earlier this year, Matt Stauffer reached out to Jason about an AI skill that he created. And he built this to automate the review process for all of the different shifts that Titan has to run. If you don't know, Titan is a Laravel agency. So they've got lots of shifts, Laravel shifts they need to run. So after seeing a demo, Jason was like, you know what? I like this idea. Let me see how I can sort of plus this. And we talked about this a little bit on our own show last week with Jason. But Jason's been making a concerted effort to integrate Shift more with AI. If you look at any of the comments on the Shifts, it will say, here's a prompt that you could use to work with your, Claude or Codex, whatever you want to use. Use this prompt and it will kind of clean this up. But what he's done here is he's built 4 different AI skills to help manage the entire Shift workflow directly from your AI. This will go from analyzing your projects on what shifts to run next, to running that shift, to reviewing the shift, even to run a one-off refactor from those skills. So a quick look at the skills. There's Shift Analyze, Shift Run, Shift Review, and Shift Refactor. Each of these will do a different piece here. Shift Analyze will say, what one do I need to run next? What shift? Shift Run will actually trigger that shift to run against your current repository. Shift Review will go through the process of saying what things need to be changed inside of my existing project based on the comments that Shift suggested. And then Shift Refactor integrates with Shift Workbench, which will do things like I need to upgrade from Mix to Vite, or I need to go from Tailwind 3 to Tailwind 4, right? Jason's been alpha testing this on his own projects for the last few weeks, but it is now open to all Shift users. Subscribers to the Shifty plan are also able to directly run the shifts included with their plan, as well as those premium refactor tasks. So you should check this one out, see it in action. Jason actually did a YouTube stream on how to, he basically fully upgraded to Laravel 13 and Livewire 4 in 15 minutes using Shift plus AI here. No manual steps, no hunting to change logs, just a smooth end-to-end upgrade. He never even opened his IDE, just prompted with Claude, and it's pretty awesome to watch. So check that one out.
Laravel Cloud launched Scale to Zero Flex Compute along with a new 4-tier pricing structure. The headline change is that your entire stack now sleeps when there's no traffic and wakes on the first request in under 500 milliseconds, so idle apps stop running up a bill. This came out of a survey that Laravel ran earlier this year with thousands of developers plus 20 individual follow-up interviews. The feedback was consistent. Developers wanted to know their costs upfront, and apps sitting idle still cost money, so if there was no easy way to cap a monthly spend. Scale to Zero and the new spending limits are the answer to that. So how does the Scale to Zero work? This is an update to the existing Flex Compute, and existing customers will continue to have access to the legacy Flex Compute. New apps get the rebuilt Flex automatically, and if you're already on Flex, you select one of the new sizes and redeploy to upgrade. The Flex Compute has been rebuilt, so your compute, database, and cache sleeps together when traffic stops and wake together when a request comes in. Some of the highlights include the entire stack sleeps and wakes as a unit 20 times faster than before. The wake time is under 500 milliseconds, down from around 10 seconds previously, and there are 3 sizes available: 512, 1 gig, and 2 gig RAM. Scheduled tasks will still fire, and queue jobs will still process. The app will wake to handle them, then go back to sleep when the work is done. Opting out keeps you on the legacy Flex sizes with roughly 10-second wake, and the new Scale to Zero sizes cost $1 more per month. Pro Compute apps stay always on and cannot scale to zero. A sleeping app doesn't go offline or become unreachable, though. It will sleep and wake on the next request, and your users won't notice the difference. I didn't even know that it was working when I turned this on for the Laracon website.
Interesting.
It just loaded that quickly. So you can enable it just by switching to the new Flex Compute. For an existing app, go in and change, go to the app compute cluster on your environment's infrastructure canvas, toggle Scale to Zero to on, and pick one of the new Flex sizes, then save and deploy. That's it. No application code changes required. And for long-running queue jobs, Laravel recommends managed queues, so a job that's still running when the app goes to sleep is not interrupted. Managed queues. You click the button, you turn it on, it spins up. I didn't realize it was like 5 seconds and the whole thing was ready to go, and it's just ticking along in the background. There is new pricing tiers alongside Scale to Zero. The same 4 plans remain, so the starter $5 a month, growth $20, and business $20 a month, plus the custom enterprise plans. And every paid plan includes $5 in monthly usage credits drawn from a single pool that covers compute, database, cache, storage, bandwidth, queue operations, and custom domains. Credits will reset each billing cycle and do not roll over. If you are already on growth or business, the $5 is applied automatically with no action needed. You can now set a hard monthly spend limit per organization, and when you hit the limit, new resources provisioning stops. Requests already being processed keep running. The limit applies to compute and excludes storage, so you can quickly bring an app back online after raising it. Alerts fire at 50, 75, and 90%, so there is plenty of warning before you reach the limit and time to decide what you want to do. And in the coming weeks, this is very exciting. Postgres has had this since day one, but in the coming weeks, scale to 0 will extend to MySQL databases. The database will suspend alongside compute and resume on the next request, again, with no application code changes required. If you'd like to learn more about the Scale to 0 Flex Compute, the new pricing tiers, you can check out the details on the Laravel Cloud blog. We'll have links to that for you in the show notes.
Awesome, folks. We are going to jump into packages, and I'm going to take the next two because the first one I feel like is actually a pretty quick one. Here's the long story short version of it. If you use the Zed editor, there is now a community Laravel extension for that editor that adds a Laravel awareness, runs a language server protocol engine, does exactly what you would think it would do. It has go-to definition across different Laravel conventions, so you can say, command click on this view or this blade component, it'll take you right to the definition. On hover, you can find references, you can rename classes. It's got autocomplete, schema-aware diagnostics. It's got blade editors and the outline panel. It's got indexing and caching. So when you start up Zed, it'll cache all those values, keep an on-disk cache so that reopening a project is almost instant and only the changed files are reparsed. Installation is real simple. There are details about that in the show notes. The second package I'm going to talk about, we've actually got another one that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. But the situation here is this package called MigrAlign, think Migration Align, is it will find the differences between your migration files and your actual database. And so this is like this gap that opens up when you edit tables directly, or when you accidentally skip a migration, or maybe if you're running in like different environments, something like that. These things can sort of fall out of alignment. And so MigrAlign will attempt to align your database with your migrations. That's the top level part of it. The installation instructions are in the show notes. A couple things I'm going to tell you. When you run it, you can say, just give me a dry run, but it will tell you how safe it is to make the changes that it's suggesting. So it'll say, this is a safe change, this is a risky change, this is a destructive change. And so you can feel good about like, oh, if it's safe, I can just apply this. There's also targeted syncing, meaning that you can say, I only want to run this against a single table or a migration instead of the entire schema, which might be a bit much. That's useful when you only need to reconcile one area. The rest of the post here is just about installation and configuration. I'll let you read that one on your own. That is MigrAlign.
Next up, Laravel Fluent Validation is an object-oriented rule builder built by Sander Muller. It's a package that replaces Laravel's traditional string-based validation syntax with a Fluent object-oriented API. It provides IDE completion and type safety, ensuring that you only apply rules that make sense for the data type being validated. Instead of concatenating strings like required pipe string, pipe min, :2, pipe max, :255, or using an array of values, you can use a chain of methods. The API is context-aware, meaning that once you define a rule type, such as a string or a date, only the methods relevant to that type are available. The package simplifies validating nested data structures by using each and children methods, which allows you to define rules in a way that mirrors your data structures rather than using flat dot notation keys. There are performance optimizations that handle O to the N wildcard expansion, fast check closures, batched database queries for exist and true, as well as integrated message labels for attributes and messages rather than defining everything in a single method on your form request. If this is of interest to you, you can check it out. We have links to that for you in the show notes.
All right, folks, if you've ever had to manage subscriptions inside of your application, so we're talking about subscription plans and then what that plan entitles you to. If you're wanting to do that inside of Laravel Entitlements tackles one or more of those involved problems with any sort of SaaS app that you're going to have. So this allows you to model what a subscriber is allowed to do, how much of it they can use, and what happens when they hit a limit or when they switch plans. So rather than rolling this on your own, here are some of the things that this allows you to solve just using the package. There are strategies about consumption. So you can say, I'm going to track these things against a single model, a single subject, or I'm going to say that this is going to be a shared counter that's applied against a pool of things. You have polymorphic ownership, so any Eloquent model can act as a subscriber. you have a plan catalog. So think about this. You define what the different plans allow up front. So here's the catalog. Here's the billing options. You can say monthly, yearly. This is recurring. This is fixed term, etc. You also have domain events that would fire. So license consumed, a release requested, license reconciled. So you have integration points for your billing webhooks or your background jobs or your audit logging and things like that. Those domain events are included in the package. And then you also have an optional Filament version 5 admin panel. Who wants to build their own? Not me. If you're using Filament, this is going to fit right into your project. So the rest of this blog post goes through how you would define those entitlement types, how you consume and check entitlements, how you make a transition from one plan to another, as well as installation instructions. You can find all of that in the show notes. Thanks so much to Paul Redman, everyone's favorite human, for writing that one up.
Playa, Playa, is a cookie-based temporary players for Laravel. It gives you a lightweight player model for visitors who aren't logged in and aimed at QR code journeys, event games, voting screens, kiosk flows, and demos where you need to recognize a returning device without putting users through registration. You can add the player middleware to any route where you want a player resolved or created, and on the first visit, the middleware creates a player record and sets the cookie, and on subsequent requests, it resolves the existing player and by default refreshes the expiry timestamp. You can access the player through both a request or a facade, and the model includes name and username columns plus a JSON data column for any application-specific details you want to attach, like score, answers, positions in a flow, and so on. A player can be associated with a real user account without forcing the visitor to log in first. This is useful when someone starts a flow anonymously and then later authenticates. The package supports BigInt, UUID, ULID, and string user key types via the user ID type config option, and the auto-link authenticated user will attach the current user automatically when set to true. There is a number of lifecycle events, so you can track when a player is created, resolved, renewed, expired, or linked to a user. And players have a configurable lifetime, which is defaulted to 30 days and can renew on each visit. Expired records are not deleted automatically. You can run the artisan command to clean them up, optionally with a grace period. Player requires PHP 8.4 and above and supports Laravel 11 through 13. You can have more details for that for you in the show notes.
This reminds me of like Jackbox games. If you've ever played that, right, where you say, hey, we've got a game that we're going to do live right now. We're putting a QR code up on the screen. If you want to join the game, scan the QR code. It doesn't make you go through a whole registration process. It just says like, oh, okay, that's you. What's your name? Jake. Okay, you're in the game now, right? It doesn't go, and then so if you come back in, it recognizes your device, but you're not like a long-term user. It's just, I need to create a user for this little period of time where we're doing this thing. So yeah, that looks pretty cool. I like that. Okay. Typed objects for Eloquent with Expressive. All right, here's the deal here. If you, like me, pass your Eloquent models around your application because you like the fact that it's like, I know this is a user object and I know exactly what it's Eloquent. I can go do the things I need to do with it. But maybe you're like, yeah, but it's an Eloquent model. Do I really need to pass that entire thing around? Expressive converts Eloquent models into typed PHP objects. It can also take those objects and convert them back into Eloquent models when your application needs to persist to the data. So the goal here is to give just your services, any actions, any tests, this typed object boundary. So think of it like that. You're just taking this Eloquent model and you're saying, nope, I want a typed object. And then you can still use Eloquent to continue to handle querying and relationships and casts and visibility rules, database rights, all of that stuff. You can still do that. But instead of passing the full Eloquent model throughout your code base, you work with these lightweight objects that have public typed properties. So you have, PHP stand is going to be really happy with you instead of all these magic methods and magic accessors that you're trying to kind of use on Eloquent. It's going to keep your domain logic separate from the database layer without forcing you to abandon Eloquent. Okay, that's what's on the tin here. The rest of it is how you do it. So you can opt models in with a simple trait or an attribute. You can generate those classes really easily using the artisan command. And then we in here go through what those different objects are going to look like, as well as how you convert a model to a typed object, how you persist a typed object back into Eloquent, etc. And on you go. So this is a really interesting one. Yannick wrote this one up, and I do think that's pretty darn cool. I think a lot of people are going to like this one. Check out that installation instructions in the show notes.
Parsel is a package that parses PDFs, Word documents, spreadsheets, presentations, and images through a single Fluent PHP API. It is built by Pushback Charged, and it wraps the LightParse Lit CLI and performs all the work locally so files are never sent to an external service. It requires PHP 8.5 and includes a command to install the Lit binary. It is a single API across all file types. You can use the same Fluent API for text to get plain text or parse for a structured document object. And the return document exposes full text, document metadata, a page count, and a pages collection. Each page carries its number, width, height, text, and a list of positioned items. Every text item includes its location and font information with coordinates, which is useful for reading tables, finding signature blocks, or mapping clauses back to their position on the page. Each item has text, positional coordinates, width, height, font name, font size, confidence, and more. There is page selection and streaming, OCR for scanned documents. You can render page previews. There are passwords and rendering options. So if you open an encrypted file using the with password method and a few chainable methods, adjust how Lit renders a document before parsing. There is testing without the binary, installation instructions, and more details about the package are available for you in the show notes.
We've got yet another play on some Eloquent stuff here. This is in-memory Eloquent models with Truffle. All right. If you remember Caleb Porzio's sushi package, I feel like we're back at this again. We're back at this again, which is this idea of, hey, we really like Eloquent. We like the API that it gives us, but we don't necessarily want to have a new database table every time we want to reach for Eloquent. So what this does is it allows you to use Eloquent without the overhead of database migrations or storage in your main database. All you have to do is use this Truffle trait. So how do you do it? You have a new class called country that extends a model and then uses the Truffle trait. Then all you do is you define a public property on this model called records. You fill in that with a multi what is the word? How am I not remembering this?
Multi-dimensional array? Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, but that's not the actual word I was going to use. It's an associative array, right? Right. Same thing, right? But yes, you fill that out and then that's it. Now you can just access those values as if they were in the database. That's it. That's the whole thing. That's the package. So you can load data from like files like a CSV or something like that. You can provide explicit schema definitions if you want a little bit additional safety to make sure that you don't accidentally push something in the CSV that's not going to work. You can do performance and caching, so you can cache it for an hour instead of resolving it every time. All sorts of interesting things here. But again, how can I use Eloquent without actually having to write to the database table? Here's how you do it. Check out Truffle.
Checkpoint by Andrea Palastri is a development dependency that scans a Laravel application for security problems and reports them through a single artisan command. It runs 26 separate checks ranging from dependency CVE audits to source level pattern matching for injection bugs, and returns a non-zero exit code when something fails so it can sit in front of a deploy. The scan looks for, as I said, 26 different checks. On the dependency side, Checkpoint shells out to the composer audit and an npm audit to service known CVEs. It flags packages published within the last few days, which is a common malware signal, and looks for suspicious entries in the vendor autoloader. For source code, it pattern matches against the kinds of constructs that tend to introduce vulnerabilities like raw queries with variable interpolation, unescaped blade output command injection through functions like exec and shell exec, path traversal in file operations, SSRF in outbound HTTP calls, insecure deserialization, and open redirects. And a third group inspects application configuration and hygiene, like missing CSRF protection, mass assignment exposure, cookie and session settings, cause rules, disabled TLS verification, leftover debug calls such as DD and dump, weak hashing, insecure random generation, world readable end files, and sensitive paths missing from git ignore. Each finding prints with a pass, warn, or fail severity and a stable 12-character hash that identifies it. You can run a subset of checks. You can configure and suppress findings. You can run it in CI and CD. There is scaffolding and custom checks available to you. A note on supply chain safety here from the author of the article, Yannick. The documentation makes a point that applies regardless of whether you adopt Checkpoint, run composer install, npm install, and the scan itself inside a Docker container, rather than directly on your machine. Malicious packages run their payloads during post-install scripts which fire before any scanner gets a chance to inspect the code, so a compromised dependency can act the moment it lands. Andrea also recommends pairing the scan with Safe Chain, which blocks known malicious NPM packages before they install. This is the reasoning behind Checkpoint's package freshness check, which flags very recently published dependencies as a precaution. This is a static scanner, so it catches patterns rather than providing exploitability. Rather than proving exploitability, and it works best as one layer alongside dependency pinning and manual review. You can read the documentation and browse the source code on GitHub.
Very cool. All right, folks. We, I'm not being cynical here. I'm just saying this, that I think we've gotten to the point where most of the things that we're talking about, a lot of the things we're talking about, are new versions of previous things that have existed that are improvements on them or a little bit different spin on them. What we're talking about here is advanced Eloquent query filtering with Filterable is the package here. Now, again, there are packages that exist out there for this, but I do think this one is pretty cool. So this provides a structured approach to Eloquent query filtering. So instead of manually building these filtering things in your controllers, it will use what my favorite thing is. It uses dedicated filter classes. I love that. And also multiple specialized engines to take the HTTP request that's coming in and then map those to database queries. And so the basic usage is this. You take your model, you add the has filterable trait, and then you bind a default filter class. So you just include, here is the filter class that I want to use. Okay. Inside of that filter class, then, you're going to configure all of that. But in your controller, here's the part that looks really cool. In your controller, all you have to do is you say return model name, task in this case, filter, arrow paginate. That filter method will pull in that task filter class, whatever that filterable model is that you defined on that model. That's going to be what gets invoked there. So the controller could not be cleaner. Super simple. Then you're asking yourself, well, how do I take the values that are coming in from the HTTP request and map them into that filterable class? That's the magic here. So there is 4 different filtering engines that handle different request formats. So there's invocable engine, rule set engine, expression engine, tree engine. All 4 of these have different ways that they map values from the request to this filterable class, and you can decide which one is most appropriate for your application. I'm not going to go through what each one of them are. You should take a look at this, but 4 different ways that you can do it. Then it also includes PHP 8 annotations for filter logic. So inside of that filterable class that we talked about that says, hey, here's how we're going to actually go through and do this. You can use PHP attributes to keep your logic nice and clean. There is authorization methods. There is casts. There is date logic. You can say if a value is required to be included or not. All sorts of stuff. Again, I'm not going to go through the actual filterable class and explain how that all works, but it does. There's also built-in caching. There is CLI and debugging tools to make getting set up easier and to make debugging the process much easier as well. Seems very interesting. If you've ever had to do this yourself, or if you are on the precipice of needing to do this across your application, I would highly suggest taking a look at this one. It looks very well thought out, very interesting. Supports Laravel 10 through 12 as of the writing. I'm sure it will support 13 shortly, but it has great documentation as well. Check out the show notes on that one.
Scheduler List by Akshay is a Laravel package that puts your scheduled tasks behind a web dashboard instead of leaving them in the PHP Artisan schedule list output. It reads the tasks you've registered, shows their cron expressions and next runtimes, and lets you trigger one from the browser and watch its output stream back. The dashboard reads the tasks you register in your console routes and renders them with their schedule, next runtime, time zone, and any constraints attached to them. A description call on a task carries through to the UI, so it's worth adding one. Tasks are then grouped by type, artisan commands, closures, and shell jobs, and you can filter the list by type or run a search across command names. You can run tasks on demand. It is disabled by default and hidden behind auth. You You can install it using Composer. We'll have links to that for you in the show notes. This is good for if you're wanting to expose all of the tasks to your internal like operations and support teams and things like that, to see when something would run to, trigger some support process or some automated system. They can see when it runs next and things like that. So definitely a useful thing to have behind your own within your own application. So check it out.
Absolutely. Really, really cool stuff there. Okay. Once again, I'm beating the same drum. Hash IDs. Anybody remember hash IDs? I remember hash IDs. Basically, the idea is that it takes an ID from your database, obfuscates it into a string so that it is not an easily guessable value, so that somebody can't just go over these, keys that are being used in your URLs and just sequentially go over them and try and, find out if they can get access to somebody else's stuff. Shouldn't happen. It does happen. But Sqids, Sqids, is the successor to hash IDs. So it takes one or more non-negative integers and it composes them into a short URL safe string, and then we'll decode that same string back into the original numbers. The couple catches here. This same encoding is supported in more than 40 languages. So an ID generated in PHP will decode the same way in JavaScript or in Python or in Rust or in Go, as long as it has the same matching settings, which is really cool. We go through the process of how you actually encode and decode a number. We have the settings for how you pad to a minimum length. So you can say, I always want at least 12 values. Even if you were just going to do a couple, I want you to pad it to be 12 characters long. Here's another interesting thing. This is not only the ability to encode a single integer. This could encode an array of values as well, which is pretty cool. So you can say not only encode ID equals 1, right? But you can say encode array 1, 2, 3. And it will encode that, and then when it decodes it will decode it back into that same array. Okay, you can set a custom alphabet. This is what allows you to sort of shuffle things around, supply your own changes so that the output is a per application scrambling. So it's not somebody can just guess your stuff. It has a block list, so it's not going to ship out a blocked word. And really, to be clear, this is not an encryption tool, right? This is security by obscurity is what it is. The output is reversible by anyone who knows the alphabet that you provided. So you shouldn't be using it to protect sensitive data or as a substitute for authorization checks, but it is a fit for like public-facing identifiers or link shorteners maybe. Encoded database primary keys, packing a few integers into a single reference to reduce lookups, etc. All good stuff here. You can install it using Composer. Sqids/Sqids is the project. Pretty cool stuff there. Very nice.
That's it. That's all we got.
That's all we have. And how do we got? 47 minutes. All right, we're going to cut ourselves off here. Thanks for listening to the show. You can find show notes for this episode at podcast.laravel-news.com/260. If you like the show, we really appreciate it if you'd rate it up 5 stars in your podcatcher of choice. If you have any questions, hit us up on Twitter, on X, at Michael Dorinda, at Jacob Bennett, or at Laravel News. Folks, it was good hanging out with you. Till next time, we'll see you.
Bye.